Before we begin, a quick heads up. This is part 2 of Shawn and Bartholomew's story. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, I highly recommend watching it first so you don't miss how their journey began. If you have, welcome back. Shawn accepted what should have been a routine assassination contract. But when he looked through his rifle scope, he realized his target, billionaire CEO Bartholomew Reeves, was his fated mate. Unable to complete the mission, Shawn confronted Bartholomew and, together, they uncovered an even bigger surprise. They had been childhood friends, separated by fate. A worn basketball keychain and a childhood drawing proved neither of them had truly forgotten the other. As they searched for the truth, they exposed a conspiracy inside Bartholomew's own company involving corruption, murder, and Shawn's former organization, Silverfang. Forced into hiding, they fell in love, survived multiple assassination attempts, and gathered the evidence needed to strike back. Now, the conspiracy knows they're alive. Shawn and Bartholomew are done running. Together, they're ready to take back everything that was stolen from them. Let's continue the story. The first crack appeared on a Wednesday morning. It wasn't dramatic. There were no arrests, no public accusations, no executives dragged from their offices in handcuffs, just a short article buried near the bottom of an independent business journal. Most people would have scrolled past it. Anonymous source raises questions about Reeves Global shipping contracts. The article was cautious, painfully cautious. It didn't mention trafficking. It didn't name Richard Holloway. It didn't accuse the company of knowingly committing a crime. Instead, it asked why Reeves Global had paid millions of dollars to several newly formed shipping companies that had no employees, no public offices, and no clear ownership records. It mentioned unusual cargo transfers, repeated changes to shipping manifests, payments authorized by members of the executive board without Bartholomew's direct approval. Then, in the final paragraph, it included one strange sentence. The fountain is only the beginning. No one reading the article would understand what it meant. Most would assume it was an expression, a dramatic choice made by the anonymous source. But in a cramped apartment above a closed bookstore, Shawn froze with a coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Across the room, Bartholomew slowly lowered the laptop. Their eyes met. "The fountain," Bartholomew whispered. Shawn placed the cup on the counter. It went through. The words carried more weight than they should have. 3 nights earlier, they had anonymously delivered a carefully selected package of financial records to a journalist known for investigating corporate corruption. Not everything. Not enough to expose the trafficking operation. Not yet. Only enough to create suspicion. Enough to make shareholders ask questions. Enough to frighten the people involved. They needed Richard and his allies to believe someone inside the organization was leaking information. They needed them nervous. Nervous people made mistakes. The sentence about the fountain had been Shawn's idea, a private signal hidden inside the anonymous message. Proof that the reporter had received their files and agreed to publish. Bartholomew stared at the article. For the first time since disappearing, the outside world was reacting to something they had done. Their plan was no longer confined to hidden servers, handwritten notes, and whispered conversations. It was moving. Slowly, quietly, but it was moving. Shawn crossed the room and stood behind him. "What are people saying?" Bartholomew refreshed the page. The article had been online for less than 40 minutes. Already comments were appearing beneath it. Some accused the journalist of inventing a scandal. Others demanded an independent audit. Several employees claimed they had noticed unusual activity within the shipping division. One anonymous commenter wrote that executives had begun removing boxes from their offices before sunrise. Bartholomew's jaw tightened. "They're running." "Some of them." Shawn leaned closer, one hand resting against the back of Bartholomew's chair. "Richard won't." "Why not?" "Men like him don't run after the first rumor." Shawn's voice was calm, certain. They convince themselves they can control it. Bartholomew looked up at him, and when he realizes he can't, a cold smile touched Shawn's lips. "Then he'll show us exactly where the bodies are buried." Bartholomew stared at him for a second. That expression is disturbing when you say it. I meant financial records. Did you? Shawn's smile widened slightly. Bartholomew shook his head, but some of the tension left his face. That had become one of Shawn's quiet talents. He could take the darkest moment and slip one dry comment into it until Bartholomew remembered how to breathe. The article refreshed again. A second publication had picked up the story, then a third. A financial analyst posted a thread questioning the company's recent transactions. Reeves Global's stock had begun to dip. Not dramatically, but enough to attract attention. Bartholomew's brief smile disappeared. People who had nothing to do with this could lose money. Temporarily. Employees could panic, which is why Grace is there. Bartholomew nodded, but his scent changed. The clean ocean air surrounding him became sharper, carrying the bitter edge of guilt. Shawn noticed immediately. He moved around the chair and crouched in front of him. Don't. Bartholomew frowned. Don't what? Take responsibility for every consequence before it happens. It's my company. And this is the infection inside it. Shawn placed both hands over Bartholomew's. You can't remove something this deep without causing pain. Bartholomew looked down at their joined hands. And what if I destroy everything while trying to save it? Then you rebuild. The answer came without hesitation. Bartholomew lifted his eyes. Shawn's expression was steady, confident, not because he believed the plan was safe. Nothing about it was safe. He believed in Bartholomew. That frightened the alpha more than doubt would have. What if I can't? Shawn's thumbs moved slowly across his knuckles. Then we rebuild. Bartholomew's breath caught. Not you. We. It was such a small word, yet it reached into every lonely part of him. His parents had raised him to believe support always came with conditions. Board members remained loyal while the company was profitable. Friends stayed close while his name opened doors. Even family affection had often felt tied to obedience. But Shawn had been given every reason to leave. Bartholomew had once been his target. Their bond had placed them both in danger. Staying meant fighting the organization that had trained Shawn and the powerful people protected by Bartholomew's own company. Still, Shawn said we, as if there had never been another option. Bartholomew leaned forward until his forehead rested against Shawn's. Their scents curled around them, ocean air and vanilla, rain, cedar and dark chocolate. The tension in the room eased beneath something warmer, something that felt increasingly like home. You're very confident for someone currently hiding in an apartment with one working burner stove, Bartholomew murmured. Shawn glanced toward the kitchen. 2 burners work. The smaller one releases smoke. That's how you know it's on. A quiet laugh escaped Bartholomew. Shawn smiled at the sound. Then the laptop chimed. Both men immediately turned. Grace had sent an encrypted message. Holloway called an emergency board meeting. Noon. Attendance mandatory. He is pushing for a vote to declare you medically unfit and permanently remove you as CEO. Bartholomew went still. Shawn rose. The tenderness vanished from his expression, replaced by the focused coldness of the assassin. He's moving faster than I expected. Bartholomew reread the message. Richard wasn't simply trying to control the rumors, he was trying to take the company. If the board officially removed Bartholomew, Richard would gain access to internal investigations, secured corporate archives, and the authority to erase records before they became public. Worse, he could portray Bartholomew's disappearance as a breakdown, a frightened CEO abandoning his responsibilities after discovering financial irregularities. Richard could turn him from a victim into the perfect scapegoat. He'll blame me, Bartholomew said. Shawn nodded. He'll say you authorized the payments. He has my digital signature, which can be copied. But the public won't know that. Not yet. Bartholomew stood and began pacing. We need to stop the vote. No, he turned sharply. No? Shawn reached for the laptop. We need to let it happen. Bartholomew stared at him as though he'd lost his mind. If they remove me, Richard controls everything. Only if he thinks the vote is legitimate. What does that mean? Shawn opened a hidden folder. Inside were copies of internal communications between Richard and 4 board members. The messages were incomplete, enough to show private meetings, not enough to prove why they had occurred. "We know who Richard owns," Shawn said, "but we don't know everyone working with him." Understanding slowly settled across Bartholomew's face. The vote forces them to choose publicly. Exactly. Every board member who supported Richard would expose themselves. Every executive who rushed to approve Bartholomew's removal would become a possible conspirator. Grace could record the meeting. Track the votes. Watch who repeated Richard's language. Observe who already understood a plan that should have been new. Bartholomew looked at the article again, a rumor outside, a panic inside. They weren't only exposing corruption, they were applying pressure. And Richard had reacted exactly as Shawn predicted. The first article had shaken the tree. Now the guilty were beginning to fall from its branches. Bartholomew's blue eyes hardened. "Tell Grace to let them vote." Shawn studied him. "You sure?" "No." The honest answer made Shawn pause. Bartholomew took a slow breath. But being afraid doesn't make it the wrong move. Something proud flickered across Shawn's face. The expression warmed Bartholomew, despite everything. Shawn began typing. He sent Grace 3 instructions. Record everything. Do not defend Bartholomew too strongly, and after the vote, leak the final count to the same journalist. Bartholomew looked over his shoulder. That will make the company look unstable. It is unstable. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying watching Richard panic. A notification appeared before Bartholomew could answer. The article had been updated. A company spokesperson had issued a statement denying all wrongdoing and dismissing the allegations as an attempt to damage Reeves Global during Bartholomew's unexplained absence. At the bottom of the statement was the spokesperson's name, issued under the authority of Acting Chairman Richard Holloway. Bartholomew's expression darkened. He gave himself a title. Shawn leaned back in his chair. He couldn't wait. He hasn't even removed me yet. Men like Richard crown themselves before the battle is over. Bartholomew looked toward the apartment window. The city continued moving below. Somewhere inside one of those towers, Richard was sitting in a boardroom that belonged to Bartholomew, issuing statements in his company's name and preparing to erase him from everything he had built. The old version of Bartholomew would have stormed into the building, demanded answers, confronted Richard directly. The old version still believed power came from standing in the center of the room and making everyone listen. Shawn had taught him something different. Sometimes, power meant remaining invisible. Listening, waiting, letting your enemy believe he had won. Bartholomew turned back toward Shawn. When they remove me, Richard will celebrate. He'll move into your office. He'll open restricted files. He'll contact the people he's protecting. Shawn smiled. And every move will lead us closer to the rest of them. Bartholomew held out his hand. Shawn took it without hesitation. Together they stared at the article that had started as a whisper. A few suspicious contracts. One anonymous source. A strange sentence about a fountain. Small enough to be ignored. Sharp. Enough to draw blood. The public didn't know it yet. Richard didn't know it yet. But the first piece of his empire had already begun to crumble, and Shawn and Bartholomew could finally see the path that would bring the rest of it down. At exactly 12 o'clock, the emergency board meeting began. Bartholomew watched from the apartment. The laptop sat open on the kitchen table. Beside it, a second screen displayed a silent feed from the Reeves Global boardroom. Grace had hidden a camera inside a conference room. Speaker. The angle wasn't perfect. It showed half the table, 3 empty chairs, wall of windows overlooking the city, and Richard Holloway seated at the head of the room. Bartholomew's chair. Richard wore a navy suit, a silver tie. His hands rested calmly over a leather folder embossed with the Reeves Global crest. He looked comfortable too. Comfortable, as though the seat had always belonged to him. Bartholomew's fingers tightened around his coffee mug. Shawn noticed. He said nothing. He simply moved closer until his thigh rested against Bartholomew's beneath the table. A quiet point of contact. A reminder. You are not watching this alone, one by one. The board members arrived. Some looked nervous, some angry. Others avoided the camera entirely, though they had no idea it existed. Grace entered last. She wore a grey suit and carried a tablet under one arm. Her expression was perfectly controlled, professional, unreadable. Richard glanced at his watch. Now that everyone is finally here, we can begin. Grace took the chair nearest the door. Are we waiting for Bartholomew? Richard's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. No. The answer came too quickly. Several board members exchanged uneasy looks. Grace tilted her head. This meeting concerns his removal as chief executive. He has a right to respond. Mr. Reeves has been unreachable for nearly 2 weeks. Richard opened the folder. He abandoned his duties during a period of financial instability and has refused every reasonable attempt at contact. Bartholomew's jaw hardened. Shawn looked toward him. Let him talk. I know, but Bartholomew's scent had already changed, ocean air sharpened by anger, vanilla turning bitter beneath it. Richard continued, given the recent allegations concerning shipping contracts, we must also consider whether Mr. Reeves's disappearance is related to personal misconduct. There it was, the first blade, not an accusation, a suggestion, carefully worded, designed to spread. One board member shifted in his seat. Are you saying Bartholomew authorized the contracts? I'm saying we cannot ignore the possibility. Grace placed her tablet on the table. You told us yesterday that the contracts were legitimate. Richard smiled, coldly. I said the company had found no evidence of criminal conduct. That isn't what I asked. The room grew quieter. Bartholomew leaned forward. Shawn's purple eyes narrowed. Grace was doing exactly what they asked, not defending Bartholomew, questioning Richard, forcing him to explain more than he wanted. Richard folded his hands. We are not here to debate wording. No, Grace replied. We're here to remove the CEO based on assumptions while the acting chairman issues public statements before being formally appointed. A faint flicker of anger crossed Richard's face. There. Small, fast, but real. Shawn saw it. So did Grace. Bartholomew murmured. Richard leaned back. Your loyalty is admirable, Miss Morgan. My loyalty is to the company. Then you should understand why decisive action is necessary. A board member named Thomas Reed cleared his throat. Thomas had served Reeves Global for 11 years. He had attended Bartholomew's father's funeral. He had toasted Bartholomew's promotion. He had once called him the future of the company. Now he opened a folder containing the proposal to remove him. I move that Bartholomew Reeves be declared temporarily unfit to serve pending a full investigation. Temporarily, Bartholomew almost laughed. The word had been chosen to make the betrayal easier to swallow. Shawn looked at the list beside the laptop. Thomas Reed's name was already circled. One of Richard's suspected allies, now confirmed, another board member seconded the motion. Helen Ward. Also on the list. The vote began. One by one, hands rose. Thomas, Helen, Michael Crane, David Porter. 4 names. Shawn and Bartholomew had suspected. Then a 5th hand rose. Bartholomew stopped breathing. Evelyn Mercer. No. The word escaped before he could stop it. Shawn looked at him. Evelyn had worked beside Bartholomew's mother. She had known him since he was a child. When he first took over the company, she had defended him against older executives who called him inexperienced. She had told him he could always trust her. On the screen, Evelyn wouldn't look toward Grace. Her hand remained raised. Richard's expression barely changed, but satisfaction softened his shoulders. He had the majority. The motion passed. Bartholomew Reeves was removed as CEO of his own company. The room applauded. Politely? Not everyone, but enough. The sound traveled through the hidden microphone. Soft, respectable, civilized. It hurt more than shouting would have. Bartholomew stared at the screen. His face remained composed. His scent did not. The ocean stormed around him. Guilt, humiliation, grief. Shawn reached for his hand beneath the table. Bartholomew gripped him so tightly it must have hurt. Shawn didn't pull away. On the screen, Richard stood. "Until this matter is resolved, I will assume full operational authority." Grace remained seated. "Of course you will." Richard looked at her. "Was there something you wished to add?" She smiled. "No. I think you've said more than enough." Then she switched off her tablet. The hidden feed continued. Richard believed the meeting had ended. That was when the real conversation began. Chairs scraped back. Several members approached Richard. Thomas lowered his voice. "How soon can we access the sealed audit files?" Richard glanced toward the door. "As soon as Morgan leaves." Michael Crane adjusted his cufflinks. "What about the journalist?" "Handled." "How?" Richard's smile disappeared. "The same way we handled the source." Bartholomew's blood ran cold. Shawn's posture changed instantly. Every trace of tenderness vanished. The assassin returned. Focused, alert, deadly. Thomas frowned. "You found them?" "Not yet." Richard closed the folder. "But Silver Fang has corrected its previous mistake." Shawn went perfectly still. Bartholomew felt it through their joined hands. Not fear, recognition, the kind that came before violence. David Porter lowered his voice. "The first contractor failed because of the bond issue." Richard's mouth twisted. "Then the next one will kill them both." The apartment became silent. Neither Shawn nor Bartholomew moved. They had expected another attempt. Hearing Richard discuss it so casually was different. A business problem, a corrected mistake, 2 lives reduced to unfinished work. On the feed, Grace re-entered the boardroom. Every man immediately stepped apart. She had forgotten nothing. She had returned on purpose. Giving. The camera time, making them nervous. Richard's expression hardened. "Something else?" Grace lifted her phone. "Actually, yes." The phones around the table began chiming, one after another. Then Bartholomew's burner phone buzzed. The article had been updated again. Reeves Global Board removes missing CEO in emergency. Vote beneath the headline was the full vote count. Every name, every hand, every betrayal. Grace looked around the room. That was fast. Richard's face lost its color. "Who released this?" Grace smiled. "Perhaps someone inside the company believes the public deserves transparency." Then she walked out. For the first time, Richard looked afraid. Shawn closed the feed. "We have enough." Bartholomew continued staring at the black screen. "Enough for what? To prove conspiracy. Not trafficking. No. Not murder. Not yet." Bartholomew released Shawn's hand and stood. He paced to the window. Below them, the city moved as if nothing had happened. People crossed streets, trains passed, lights changed. Somewhere, reporters were calling his company, employees were whispering in hallways, investors were selling shares. Richard was likely ordering security to sweep the building, and Bartholomew had just watched 5 people he trusted help steal his life's work. Shawn approached slowly. He stopped behind him, close enough to offer comfort. Not close enough to assume it would be accepted. "Evelyn surprised you." Bartholomew laughed bitterly. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to me. She knew my mother." Shawn waited. "After my mother died, Evelyn checked on me every week." His voice became quieter. "She helped me prepare for my first board presentation. When the others said I was too young to lead, she stood beside me." He swallowed. "I thought she cared." Shawn's chest tightened. Betrayal was something he understood too well. It wasn't only the act, it was the damage it did to every memory that came before. Every kindness became suspicious. Every shared moment turned into evidence of manipulation. Shawn moved closer. This time he placed both hands on Bartholomew's shoulders, not restraining him, steadying him. "She may have cared." Bartholomew turned. That makes it worse. I know. Blue eyes met purple. Bartholomew looked tired. Not physically, deeper than that, like the company had taken a piece of him when it voted. Shawn's hands slid slowly from his shoulders to his arms. Tell me what you need. The question startled him. Not what should they do, not what came next. What did he need? Bartholomew had spent his entire life being useful, managing crises, providing answers, making decisions. People asked what he could give. Them. Very few asked what he needed. He looked down. I don't know. Then we start small. Shawn guided him toward the couch. Sit. Bartholomew obeyed. That alone showed how exhausted he was. Shawn disappeared into the kitchen. A minute later, he returned, with water and the remains of a sandwich from the night before. Bartholomew stared at the plate. You're feeding me leftovers after I lost my company. You didn't lose it. That sounded almost inspirational. Eat. Bartholomew took a bite. Shawn sat beside him. Their shoulders touched. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It held everything. Words couldn't fix. After a while, Bartholomew leaned sideways. His head settled against Shawn's shoulder. The Omega went still, then relaxed. Carefully, he wrapped an arm around Bartholomew's waist. The Alpha's scent softened. Not completely. The grief remained, but it no longer filled the room. You were right, Bartholomew said. About the vote. Shawn looked down at him. We know who chose Richard. 5 people, and 3 who refused. Bartholomew lifted his head. 3. In his pain, he had focused only on the betrayal. 3 board members had voted against removing him. 3 had demanded evidence. 3 had refused Richard. Not everyone was lost. Shawn picked up the laptop. Grace sent another message. Bartholomew read it. Richard has ordered a complete purge of the internal audit department. He wants every restricted file transferred to the executive floor by tomorrow morning. Bartholomew straightened. He's moving. The evidence. Exactly. Which means the files we need will finally be in one place. Shawn's expression sharpened. The executive archive. A secure records room beneath Bartholomew's former office. Biometric locks. No remote access. No external network. Paper records, physical drives and signed originals were stored there precisely because they could not be hacked. Richard would move. The audit material there to destroy it privately, but doing so would also bring together documents that had previously been scattered across departments. Payments, cargo records, executive authorizations, original signatures, everything they needed. Bartholomew looked toward Shawn. You want to break into my company? Our company. Bartholomew raised an eyebrow. Shawn's confidence faltered for half a second. You said we rebuild together. A slow smile spread across Bartholomew's face. You remembered. I remember everything. You say? The honesty beneath the words changed the air between them. Bartholomew's expression softened. Shawn looked away first. He always did when his feelings became too visible. Bartholomew touched his chin and gently turned him back. No hiding from me. I'm not hiding. You are. I was developing the plan. While blushing, Shawn frowned. You're recovering quickly. Bartholomew leaned closer. You're very comforting. You're very annoying. And you love me. Shawn's gaze softened. Unfortunately, Bartholomew kissed him. Slowly, not with the desperation of the cabin porch, not because either feared they might die before getting another chance. This kiss was quieter, a promise made in the middle of defeat. When they separated, Shawn kept his forehead against Bartholomew's. We'll take it back. The company. Everything. Bartholomew closed his eyes. For the first time since the vote, he believed him. They spent the next 6 hours preparing. Grace provided employee schedules. Bartholomew drew the layout of the executive floors from memory. Shawn studied security rotations. Loading docks, stairwells, and blind spots. They could not enter through the lobby. Every camera would identify Bartholomew. They could not use the parking garage. Richard had replaced the security team. The service tunnels beneath the building were monitored, but there was one route. Richard wouldn't expect a private elevator connecting the old Reeves family penthouse to the executive floor. The penthouse had been unused for years. Bartholomew's father once stayed there during late negotiations. After his death, Bartholomew had locked it and never returned. Richard knew it existed, but he didn't know Bartholomew had disabled its digital access and kept the mechanical override key. Shawn examined the small brass key in Bartholomew's palm. "You've carried this the entire time?" It was on the same ring as the basketball charm. Shawn went quiet. The old metal basketball hung beside it. One key to his childhood, one key to his company. Both carried for years without knowing when either would matter again. Shawn closed Bartholomew's fingers around them. "Keep them." Bartholomew looked at him. "I thought you'd take the elevator key. I'll get us to the building." Shawn's purple eyes held his. "You open the door." The meaning settled between them. Shawn could protect him, guide him, fight beside him, but Bartholomew would reclaim his own life, not as Shawn's helpless target, not as a CEO waiting to be rescued, as his partner. Bartholomew slipped the keys into his pocket. "When do we go?" Shawn checked the time. "Tomorrow night." "And until then?" "We disappear." Bartholomew glanced around the apartment. "We're already hiding." "No." Shawn began closing laptops and gathering files. "Richard knows we're alive. Silver Fang knows we're together. This location is burned." As if summoned by his words, something struck the window. Not a bullet. A small black object. It stuck to the glass with a metallic click. Shawn's face changed. "Move!" He grabbed Bartholomew and pulled him behind the brick wall beside the window. A sharp flash erupted outside. The glass did not shatter. Instead, the apartment lights died. The laptop screens went black. The refrigerator stopped humming. Every electronic device in the room went silent. Bartholomew's heart pounded. "What was that?" "Electromagnetic charge." Shawn drew his pistol. They killed the power and wiped anything unshielded. Footsteps sounded in the stairwell. Several sets. Fast, controlled, coming upward. Shawn reached for the duffel bag. Bartholomew stared toward the apartment door. "Silver Fang?" Shawn checked the magazine in his weapon. His expression was calm, too calm. "Yes." "How many?" The footsteps stopped outside. Shawn took Bartholomew's hand. "Enough that we shouldn't still be here when they enter." The doorknob began turning. Shawn pulled him toward the rear window. 6 floors above the alley, no fire escape, no safe path down. Bartholomew looked outside, then back at him. "This is your escape plan?" Shawn opened the window. Rain blew into the apartment. Across the narrow alley was another building, 4 feet away. Its rooftop sat 1 story lower. Bartholomew stared. Absolutely not. The apartment door shook beneath a heavy impact. Shawn climbed. "Onto the ledge. Trust me. I trusted you when you said 2 burners worked. They did. 1 caught fire. That was unrelated." The door splintered. Shawn held out his hand. Bartholomew looked at it, then at the alley, then into the eyes of the man who had once aimed a rifle at him and now stood prepared to jump into darkness beside him. He took Shawn's hand. Together, Shawn smiled. Always. The door burst open, and they jumped. They landed hard. Shawn hit the opposite rooftop first, boots skidding across wet gravel. Bartholomew came down a fraction of a second later, too close to the edge. His heel slipped. For one terrifying moment, half his body disappeared over the side. Shawn caught him by the wrist. The sudden weight nearly pulled them both down. Rain struck their faces. 6 floors below, the alley waited in darkness. Bartholomew looked down once. Only once. Then, immediately, looked back at Shawn. "Do not let go." Shawn's grip tightened until his knuckles hurt. "I wasn't planning to." The apartment door across the alley slammed open. Dark figures rushed into the room they had abandoned. A flashlight beam swept over the window. Shawn dropped flat, pulling Bartholomew against the rooftop. The Alpha landed partly on top of him. There, Scents surged beneath the panic, ocean air sharpened by fear, cedar and rain turning almost metallic with adrenaline. For one breathless second, they lay pressed together in the storm. Bartholomew's face hovered inches above Shawn's. "You called that a plan?" Shawn stared up at him. "We're alive." That is an extremely generous definition of success. A red laser skimmed across the rooftop. Shawn rolled them behind a ventilation unit. A suppressed shot struck the metal where their heads had been. The sound was small. The damage wasn't. "Move." They ran. Not toward the stairwell. Shawn knew it would already be covered. Instead, he led Bartholomew across the rooftop toward an old maintenance structure near the rear edge. He kicked open a rusted door. Inside was a narrow ladder disappearing into darkness. Bartholomew looked down. "Where does that go?" "No idea." "You don't know?" "I didn't build the building." Another shot struck the doorframe. Shawn grabbed the ladder. Down. Bartholomew climbed. Shawn followed, pulling the door shut above them just as footsteps reached the rooftop. They descended through dust, darkness, and the smell of rusting metal. The ladder ended inside a forgotten boiler room. Pipes lined the walls. Water dripped steadily from somewhere overhead. Shawn jumped down and immediately searched the room for another exit. Bartholomew leaned against the wall, breathing hard. His suit was torn at one knee. His hair had fallen across his face. There was a scrape along his palm where the rooftop gravel had cut him. Shawn noticed it instantly. "You're bleeding." Bartholomew stared at him. "You were shot 3 days ago. It was a graze. And this is a scratch." Shawn took his hand anyway. He examined the scrape beneath the weak emergency light. The touch was quick, professional, yet Bartholomew felt the tremor hidden beneath it. Shawn had nearly lost him on that roof. The assassin could hide fear from most people, not from his mate. Bartholomew gently closed his fingers around Shawn's wrist. "I'm all right." Shawn didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the injury. "Shaw." The childhood nickname broke through the panic. Purple eyes lifted. Bartholomew stepped closer. "You caught me." Shawn's jaw tightened. "I almost didn't, but you did. That isn't good enough." The words came out harsher than intended. Bartholomew released him. "What would be good enough?" Shawn turned away. "A plan where you aren't. Jumping between buildings while armed men chase us." "That was your plan." "I know." "Then perhaps next time we make one together." Shawn looked back sharply. Bartholomew's expression was controlled, but hurt lived beneath it. The truth settled uncomfortably between them. Shawn had asked Bartholomew to trust him, again and again. "Stay here. Follow me. Move when I say. Jump when I say." He had called them partners, but under pressure. He still treated Bartholomew like someone to protect rather than someone capable of choosing. "I kept you alive," Shawn said, "and I'm grateful." "That sounds like there's a but." "There is." Bartholomew wiped rainwater from his face. "You decide everything when danger appears. Where we go, what I know, whether I'm allowed to help. Because I have experience, and I have a life that's being dismantled while I hide behind you." Shawn went still. Bartholomew's scent had changed. Not anger alone. Frustration, humiliation, the ache of a powerful man who had lost control over almost every part of his existence. His company, his name, his safety, even his ability to choose how. He fought back. "I'm not asking to lead a gunfight," Bartholomew continued. "I'm asking you to remember that I am standing beside you, not behind you." The words struck deeper than accusation, because Shawn knew what it felt like to have decisions made for him. Silver Fang had controlled his work, his identity, his body, his future. Yet fear had made him repeat the same pattern with the person he loved. Not out of cruelty, out of terror. The possibility of losing Bartholomew again was unbearable. Shawn lowered his head. "I don't know how to do this." Bartholomew's expression softened. "Do what?" "Protect someone without controlling the situation." The honesty drained the tension from the room. Shawn looked at him. "I spent my entire life surviving alone. If I made a mistake, I paid for it. Now, every decision could hurt you. And every decision you make alone could hurt us both. Shawn nodded slowly. Bartholomew extended his hand, not demanding offering, then we learn. Shawn looked at it. The same hand that had once shared arcade prizes with him. The same hand that had pulled him into their first kiss. The same hand he had nearly lost over the edge of a rooftop minutes earlier. He took it. Their fingers tightened around each other. Together, Shawn said. Together. Bartholomew agreed. A heavy door slammed somewhere beyond the boiler room. Both men turned. The argument ended. The danger had not. But something between them had shifted. Shawn pointed toward two exits. One leads to the alley. The other, probably, connects to the building basement. Bartholomew studied the pipes running along the ceiling. The alley will be watched, probably. And the basement? Unknown. Bartholomew listened. A faint mechanical hum vibrated through the wall to their right. Laundry equipment. Shawn looked at him. What? This building used to be a hotel. The service laundry was beneath the western wing. You know that. How? My company considered buying it 8 years ago. Despite the danger, pride flickered across Shawn's face. Which exit? Bartholomew pointed to the right. That one should connect to an underground service corridor. It leads beneath the block. Shawn handed him the pistol from his coat. This time it wasn't a desperate command. It was trust. You go first, or... Me? Bartholomew checked the safety the way Shawn had taught him. You first. I know the building. You know how to survive it. A faint smile touched Shawn's lips. Good answer. They disappeared into the corridor together. Behind them, Silver Fang entered the boiler room less than a minute later. By then, Shawn and Bartholomew were already beneath the next block. They emerged through a delivery entrance shortly before. Dawn. The rain had eased to a mist. Neither spoke until they had crossed 3 streets. Changed direction twice and entered a 24-hour laundromat through the rear. Bartholomew looked around at the humming machines. You take me to the most romantic places. Shawn checked the windows. I'll remember that when planning our anniversary. Bartholomew paused. Anniversary? Shawn stopped moving. The word had slipped out, a future assumption. A year from now, maybe many years, a life long enough to celebrate. Bartholomew's tired expression softened. You're blushing. I'm checking surveillance. You're staring at a detergent dispenser. It could contain a camera. It contains bleach. Shawn turned away. Bartholomew smiled for the first time since the attack. They purchased 2 cheap sweatshirts from a vending machine and used the laundromat bathroom to clean the worst of the dirt and blood from their clothes. Then Shawn opened an emergency locker hidden beneath the last row of dryers. Inside waited cash, 2 identification cards, a phone sealed inside a metal case, and a set of car keys. Bartholomew stared. How many emergency lockers do you have? In this city? Yes. 4. That answer was more concerning than reassuring. 20. Minutes later, they were driving away in a plain grey sedan. This time, Bartholomew sat with the map open across his knees. Shawn drove, but they chose the route together. The old Reeves penthouse occupied the upper floors of a limestone building less than a mile from the company headquarters. It had once represented everything Bartholomew hated about his childhood. Luxury without warmth. Rooms designed to impress adults rather than comfort a lonely boy. His father had used it during long negotiations. His mother hosted dinners there. Bartholomew had spent many evenings sitting at its windows, looking toward the Fountain District and wondering whether Shawn was waiting for him. Now it would become their way back inside. They entered through a private garage shortly after sunset the following night. Bartholomew used the mechanical key. The lock resisted, at first, then turned with a heavy click. The penthouse smelled like dust and old wood. Sheets covered the furniture. Portraits lined the hallway. Every surface carried the silence of a place abandoned, but never emptied. Shawn walked through slowly. He stopped before a framed photograph of a young Bartholomew standing between his parents. The boy wore a formal suit. His posture was perfect. His smile wasn't. You looked miserable. I was. You still kept the photograph. I didn't keep any of this. Bartholomew pulled the sheet from a nearby table. My family did. Shawn looked around. This place is yours. Legally. That isn't what I meant. Bartholomew. Understood. Ownership and belonging were not the same. He had inherited buildings, companies, names, but very few places had ever felt like his. Shawn stepped closer. We don't have to stay here after tonight. Bartholomew looked toward the dark windows. As a child, he had dreamed of escaping this building to see Shawn. Now Shawn stood inside it beside him. No, Bartholomew said. I think I needed to come back. He walked to the window. The fountain. District was visible between the towers, smaller than he remembered. Still there, Shawn joined him. For a while, neither spoke. Then Bartholomew reached into his pocket and removed the basketball keychain. The worn metal charm rested against his palm. I used to hold this at that window. Shawn's throat tightened. I used to sit at the fountain holding mine. So close. Not close enough. Bartholomew closed his hand around the charm. We're here now. Shawn looked at him. Yes. Not a promise that the past, no. Longer mattered. A recognition that it had not won. At 11:30, Grace sent the signal. Richard had moved the audit files. The executive floor was nearly empty. 2 security guards remained outside the archive. 3rd patrolled the private offices. Grace had created a false electrical fault that would disable the East Wing cameras for exactly 9 minutes. 9 minutes to reach the archive. Copy the physical drives. Photograph the original records and leave. Before the system reset, Bartholomew stood before the private elevator. He wore a dark suit taken from the penthouse. Wardrobe, white shirt, no tie. His black hair swept back from his face. The clothes belonged to the life Richard had tried to steal. For the first time since disappearing, Bartholomew looked fully like the CEO again. Shawn watched him fasten his cuff. What? Bartholomew glanced over. You're staring. Shawn looked away. You clean up well. A smile touched Bartholomew's mouth. Was that a compliment? It was an observation. Your scent says otherwise. Shawn's cheeks warmed. Focus. Bartholomew adjusted the collar of Shawn's black turtleneck. The Omega wore his trench coat over a shoulder holster. Silver hair pushed back enough to keep it from his eyes, purple gaze sharp and alert, the assassin and the CEO. Not target and weapon. Partners. Bartholomew rested his hand against Shawn's chest. Before we go down there, we agree on one thing. Shawn waited. If the plan changes, we decide together. The instinct to object rose immediately. So did the memory of the boiler room. Shawn covered Bartholomew's hand with his. Together, the elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. Bartholomew inserted the old brass key into the control panel. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the hidden lights activated. A single button appeared. Executive floor. Bartholomew pressed it. The elevator began descending. Neither man spoke. Their reflections stared back from the mirrored walls. Bartholomew looked composed. Shawn looked dangerous. Their hands found each other between them, not from fear, from choice. The elevator stopped. Doors opened onto darkness. Shawn moved first, but only half a step. Enough to shield, not enough to leave Bartholomew behind. The executive floor looked different at night. Long corridors, glass offices, city lights reflected across polished floors. At the far end stood Bartholomew's former office. The nameplate had already been changed. Richard Holloway, Acting Chief Executive Officer. Bartholomew stared at it. Shawn followed his gaze. Want me to remove it? No. Bartholomew's voice was quiet. Leave it. Why? So he can see it. When they arrest him, Shawn smiled. That was attractive. Focus. I am focused. The camera lights above them flickered out. Grace's signal. 9 minutes began. They moved. The first guard never saw Shawn approach. One moment he stood outside the archive. The next he was unconscious on the carpet, lowered silently rather than allowed to fall. Bartholomew stared. He'll wake up? Yes. When? Eventually. Comforting. The second guard rounded the corner. Bartholomew stepped from the shadows before Shawn could move. Mr. Reeves? The guard froze. Recognition overwhelmed training. Bartholomew straightened. Every inch the CEO. Open the archive. The guard stared. Sir. You're not authorized. This is my building. Mr. Holloway gave strict orders. And now you have a choice. Bartholomew stepped closer. You can help preserve evidence in a federal criminal investigation, or you can explain why you helped Richard Holloway destroy it. The guard's face changed. Fear, confusion, doubt. Shawn watched silently. This was Bartholomew's battlefield. No gunfire, no blades. Power expressed through certainty. The guard looked toward the unconscious man, then at Shawn, then back to Bartholomew. What? Investigation. Bartholomew took out a copied shipping manifest. The guard read the first page. His color drained. I didn't know. I believe you. That mattered. Bartholomew wasn't threatening him. He was giving him a way out. The guard entered his access code. The archive opened. 8 minutes. Shawn warned. They entered. Shelves filled the room. Boxes, signed contracts, sealed audit files, hard drives stored in locked metal drawers. For 1 second, the scale of it overwhelmed Bartholomew. Years of corruption hidden inside his walls. Shawn placed a hand against his back. Tell me what matters most. The words centered him. Bartholomew moved to the shipping records, original manifests, vendor contracts, board authorizations. Shawn opened the drive cabinet. Payment servers, internal correspondence, security backups. They worked side by side, photographing, copying, sorting. The guard helped. 5 minutes remained. Then Shawn stopped. A file rested inside the lowest drawer. Not company stationery, silver paper, a black wolf stamped across the front, silver fang. Shawn reached for it. Bartholomew noticed his expression. What is it? Shawn opened the folder. Inside were contracts. Not only Bartholomew's, dozens of names, executives, journalists, witnesses, government investigators, people marked for death, some completed, some pending. One name appeared near the top of the newest. Tage Grace Morgan. Bartholomew felt the room tilt. When? Shawn read the notation. Tonight. Bartholomew immediately reached for the encrypted phone. No signal. The archive walls blocked it. We have to warn her. We need the files. Grace could be dying while we stand here copying evidence. Shawn looked toward the drives. 6 minutes of work. Years of proof. The chance to destroy Richard and Silver Fang. Then he looked at Bartholomew. This was the moment that would once have triggered a command. Stay. Let me decide. Instead, Shawn asked, What do you think? Bartholomew's breathing steadied. He looked at the folder, at the files, at the guard, then toward the door. We split the objective, not ourselves. Shawn waited. The guard continues copying the drives. We take the physical contracts and go. To Grace. The guard looked alarmed. I can't. Bartholomew met his eyes. You said you didn't know. I didn't. Then help us stop it. The man swallowed, then nodded. Shawn handed him the copying device. If the cameras return before this finishes, close the archive and walk away. Do not try to be brave. The guard accepted it. What about you? Shawn took the Silver Fang folder. I'm frequently brave in very stupid ways. Bartholomew almost smiled. The overhead lights flickered, camera power returning early. Grace's message had promised 9 minutes. They had used 4. Something had changed. Shawn looked toward the corridor. This is a trap. The archive door slammed, shut behind them. The lock engaged. From the other side came slow applause. Richard Holloway's voice entered through the security speaker. Welcome home, Bartholomew. Bartholomew stared at the camera above the door. Richard appeared on the wall monitor, seated inside Bartholomew's office, smiling. You truly should have stayed missing. Shawn moved closer to Bartholomew. Not in front, beside him. Richard's gaze shifted toward the assassin. And you. His smile sharpened. Silver Fang spent years making you useful. What a disappointment to see all that discipline ruined by an old childhood infatuation. Shawn's scent turned cold. Dark, violent Bartholomew reached for his hand, not to calm him, to remind him. Together, Richard noticed, his expression filled with contempt. You actually believe he loves you? Bartholomew answered before Shawn could. I know he does. Richard laughed. You know nothing about him. I know enough. He kills for money. He refused $20 million for me. The smile disappeared from Richard's face. Bartholomew stepped toward the camera. You underestimated him because he was an Omega. Richard's jaw tightened. You underestimated me because you thought grief made me weak. He raised the Silver Fang folder. And now we have everything. Richard leaned forward. No, you have a locked room and several minutes before my security team arrives. Shawn glanced toward the ceiling vents. The building plans formed in his mind. Archive walls, air system, fire suppression, mechanical access. Bartholomew saw the calculation. What do you need? Shawn looked at him. Can you trigger the building fire protocol from inside this room? Bartholomew followed his gaze. The manual alarm opens all electronically sealed doors. Richard's face changed on the monitor. Only slightly. Enough. Shawn smiled. That means yes. There's a problem. What? The archive uses a dry chemical system. Triggering the alarm seals the ventilation before releasing it. How long? 30 seconds. Shawn looked at the guard, then at the evidence, then at Bartholomew. A dangerous plan. Very little time. This time he did not issue an order. He held out his hand. Your building. Bartholomew took it. Your escape. Richard rose from the chair. Do not touch that alarm. Bartholomew looked directly into the camera. For years, Richard had spoken to him like a mentor, an uncle, a trusted advisor. Now Bartholomew saw him clearly, not as family, not as the man who had stolen his company. As someone who had built his power on Bartholomew's trust. That power ended here. Bartholomew pulled the alarm. Red lights flooded the archive. A mechanical voice began counting down. Fire containment release in 30 seconds. Locks disengaged throughout the floor. Shawn kicked the door open. Security rushed around the corner. Bartholomew grabbed the contracts. The guard held the copied drive. Shawn drew his weapon. Then all three ran straight toward Richard's office. Not away from him. Toward him, because escaping was no longer enough. They had spent too long reacting to Richard's moves, too long hiding, too long surviving. Now they were inside his stolen office, holding the proof of his crimes. And before the night ended, Richard Holloway was going to learn exactly what happened when an assassin and a CEO finally stopped running. The archive doors burst open. Shawn moved first. Not toward Richard, toward the two security officers rounding the corner. His body became pure instinct. One guard reached for his weapon. Shawn was already there, a sharp strike to the wrist. The pistol clattered across the marble floor. The second guard lunged. Shawn twisted beneath the attack, redirected the man's momentum, and sent him crashing into the wall hard enough to knock the air from his lungs. Neither man was seriously injured. Neither would be standing anytime soon. Go! Shawn shouted. Bartholomew ran, the copied drive in one hand. The Silver Fang contracts tucked beneath his arm. The loyal security guard stayed beside him. The fire alarms echoed throughout the executive floor. Employees poured from offices. Executives flooded into hallways. Sprinklers hadn't activated yet, but flashing red lights transformed the polished corridors into something chaotic and surreal. Exactly what Shawn wanted. Confusion hid movement. Movement created opportunity. Bartholomew reached Richard's office first. The large glass doors slid open automatically. Richard was gone. His chair still spun slowly behind the desk. He ran. Shawn appeared beside him seconds later. Of course he did. He was just here. Shawn immediately scanned the room. Bookshelves. Windows. Private conference area, wet bar. Something felt wrong. His eyes landed on a photograph hanging behind Richard's desk. It wasn't level, only by a few degrees. Someone had touched it recently. Shawn crossed the room. Without hesitation, he pulled the frame aside. Behind it, a biometric scanner. Found him. Bartholomew stared. I never knew this existed. Because it wasn't built for you. Richard had built himself an escape. Shawn looked toward Bartholomew. I need your hand. What? You're still registered as CEO. Understanding flashed across Bartholomew's face. He placed his palm on the scanner. Nothing happened. Richard had already removed him. The screen flashed. Access denied. Bartholomew's shoulders dropped. He deleted me. No. Shawn knelt beside the scanner. He downgraded you. His fingers moved across hidden maintenance screws. The panel came loose. Several wires. A backup diagnostic port. A tiny emergency switch. Shawn smiled. Found it. What? My favorite thing. Illegal wiring. One quick adjustment. The screen rebooted. Emergency administrator override. Bartholomew placed his hand against the scanner again. This time, access granted. A hidden section of the wall slid open. A narrow hallway disappeared into darkness. Richard's private escape route. He planned this for years, Bartholomew whispered. Shawn nodded, which means he believes no one else knows about it. Meaning, he won't be running. He'll be walking. The three of them hurried into the passage. The tunnel was dimly lit, concrete walls. Security cameras every 20 feet. Richard's footsteps echoed somewhere ahead. Not running. Walking. Confident. Certain no one could follow. Bartholomew's heart pounded. 20 years. 20 years building a company. 20 years trusting the wrong people. 20 years believing Richard cared about him. The man had attended birthdays, graduations, his parents' funerals. He had comforted him, lied to him, used him. Every step down the tunnel stripped away another memory, until only anger remained. Ahead, a steel door opened. Richard emerged into an underground parking garage. He froze. His luxury sedan waited with the engine running. The chauffeur looked up, then noticed Shawn. Sir? Richard slowly turned around. There they were, Shawn, Bartholomew, alive, standing together. The expression on Richard's face shifted from surprise to irritation. I really hoped the fire would delay you longer. Bartholomew stepped forward. You tried to kill me. Richard sighed. As dramatic as ever. You murdered people. I protected investments. You trafficked innocent people. I managed supply chains. You destroyed lives. Richard smiled. I made difficult decisions. Bartholomew's fists trembled. Shawn noticed. Without thinking, he reached for Bartholomew's hand. Their fingers intertwined. Immediately, naturally. Richard looked at them. His smile disappeared. So that's real. Neither answered. Richard laughed quietly. I wondered if Silver Fang had exaggerated. He looked directly at Shawn. You abandoned your entire life. For an alpha. The words hung in the air. Shawn's expression never changed. I abandoned my life because I finally found one worth living. Bartholomew looked at him. His chest tightened. Richard scoffed. You think love survives reality? It already has. You've been together what? A week? You'll get bored. You'll resent each other. The bond will fade. Shawn shook his head. No, you don't know that. I do. Richard folded his arms. And how exactly? Shawn smiled. Because if the bond disappeared tomorrow, I'd still choose him. Silence. Bartholomew felt something inside him crack. Not painfully, warmly. The mate bond pulsed, strong, steady. But Shawn wasn't talking about fate. He was talking about choice, every single day. Bartholomew stepped closer until their shoulders touched. I'd choose you too. Neither realized how close they'd moved. Richard did. His jaw tightened. You two actually believe this makes you stronger? It does, Bartholomew answered. No, Richard's smile returned. It makes you predictable. He snapped his fingers. The chauffeur drew a pistol. 3 more men emerged from behind parked vehicles. Hidden security. Shawn immediately pushed Bartholomew behind him. The Alpha frowned. Shawn, stay behind me. Bartholomew grabbed his arm. No. The Omega looked back. You promised. The words hit instantly. Together. Not behind. Shawn exhaled. Slowly. Then nodded. Together. The 2 men shifted until they stood shoulder to shoulder, not protector and protected. Partners. Richard laughed. How touching. You've learned teamwork. He raised one hand. Kill them. The guards moved. Then, Federal agents! The shout exploded through the garage. Every head turned. Black SUVs crashed through the entrance. Doors flew open. Armed agents flooded the parking structure. FBI! Drop your weapons! Richard's confidence shattered. No. His eyes darted toward Bartholomew. You! Bartholomew smiled. No. Richard looked confused. Shawn answered instead. We did. Grace stepped from one of the SUVs. She held up the copied hard drive, along with the Silver Fang contracts. The evidence was automatically uploaded the moment we left the archive. Richard stared. The drive was never the backup. Shawn smiled. It was the decoy. Grace held up her phone. The real files reached federal investigators 23 minutes ago. Richard slowly looked back toward Bartholomew. You planned this? Bartholomew shook his head. We planned it. The single word carried years of meaning. Not I. There Richard's shoulders slumped. For the first time. He looked old. Very old. Agents surrounded him. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. As he was led away, he looked over his shoulder one final time. I raised you. Bartholomew's eyes never left his. No, you used me. Richard disappeared into the waiting vehicle. Silence settled over the garage. Then Bartholomew's legs gave out. Not from injury. Relief. 20 years of pressure collapsed at once. Shawn caught him before he reached the ground. The Omega knelt with him, one hand cupping Bartholomew's face. Hey! Blue eyes brimmed with tears. It's over. Shawn smiled softly. No. Bartholomew looked confused. It's finally beginning. The Alpha laughed through the tears. You always know what to say. I usually don't. You do with me. For a long moment they simply looked at one another. The flashing lights, the shouting agents, the chaos. Everything faded. Bartholomew rested his forehead against Shawn's. I love you. Shawn smiled. I know, Bartholomew laughed. That wasn't the right response. I know. So? Shawn leaned forward, their noses brushed. Purple eyes met blue. I love you too. Then he kissed him. Not urgently, not desperately, slowly, like 2 people who finally believed they had tomorrow. Around them, agents politely looked away. Grace smiled to herself. After 20 years, a basketball keychain. One childhood promise, one impossible assignment, and countless people who tried to tear them apart. Shawn and Bartholomew had finally found their way home, in each other. 6 months later, for the first time in years. Shawn woke because the morning sun found his face, not because of an alarm, not because someone was trying to kill him, not because another mission had arrived. He frowned at the sunlight before instinctively rolling over. Only to bury his face against Bartholomew's shoulder, the Alpha chuckled sleepily. You know. His voice was rough from sleep. Most people say good morning. Shawn didn't move. I'm considering it. So this is consideration? Mm-hmm. Bartholomew smiled, wrapping an arm around his Omega's waist. You've become surprisingly affectionate. I was always affectionate. You absolutely were not. I just wasn't around anyone worth hugging. Bartholomew laughed. There he is. What? The sarcastic assassin. I'm retired. The sarcasm isn't. Shawn finally opened one eye. I kept that, I noticed. The house was quiet. A small lake stretched beyond the bedroom windows. Morning mist drifted across the water, while birds filled the silence that had once been replaced by gunfire and sirens. Their cabin had become something more. Not a hideout, a home. The old apartment had served its purpose. Too many memories of fear lingered there. This place held different ones: movie nights, burned pancakes, late-night arguments over whose turn it was to wash dishes, Shawn insisting he didn't know how to cook despite somehow making perfect coffee every morning, Bartholomew insisting he could assemble furniture without instructions. He couldn't. One bookshelf still leaned ever so slightly to the left. Neither of them fixed it. It made them laugh every time they noticed. Bartholomew reached toward the bedside table. His fingers found the familiar basketball keychain. The old metal charm still rested beside the framed childhood drawing. They never put either away. Not because they were afraid of forgetting, because they liked remembering. Bartholomew traced the worn edges with his thumb. "I still can't believe you kept yours." Shawn looked at the matching charm. "It reminded me someone had been kind to me." Bartholomew looked over. "You were more than kind to me." Shawn tilted his head. "When I was locked in that house." Bartholomew smiled softly. "I used to sit at my window every afternoon. I know. I hoped I'd see a little silver-haired boy waiting by the fountain." Shawn reached across the bed and laced their fingers together. "I was." Bartholomew swallowed. "I know." For years they had been separated by only a few city blocks. Two lonely children searching for each other, neither knowing the other was doing exactly the same thing. Shawn lifted Bartholomew's hand and kissed his knuckles. "No more waiting." Bartholomew smiled. "No. Never again." They stayed like that for another minute, simply enjoying the quiet. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. Eventually. Bartholomew groaned dramatically. "I suppose responsible adults have to go to work." Shawn looked confused. "You do? And you?" "I'm retired. You own a security consulting company. I supervise." "You spent 12 hours writing training manuals yesterday. I supervised aggressively." Bartholomew laughed. After Silver Fang collapsed, Shawn had refused every offer from government agencies. No more killing, no more covert operations. Instead, he trained bodyguards, corporate security teams, and rescue specialists. He taught people how to protect lives, not take them. It suited him better than he'd ever admit. Bartholomew returned to Reeves Global 3 months earlier. The company looked different now. Transparent audits, employee profit sharing, mental health support, anonymous reporting systems, entire departments rebuilt from the ground up. Whenever reporters praised the company's transformation, Bartholomew always gave the same answer. It wasn't rebuilt by one person. He never elaborated. He didn't need to. Shawn knew exactly who he meant. A knock echoed downstairs. Grace's voice floated upward. "If you two are awake, I'm letting myself in." Bartholomew sighed. "She has a key. You gave her one." "I regret everything." Grace appeared a moment later carrying 2 paper bags. "I brought breakfast." Shawn sat up immediately. "You brought cinnamon rolls." "I did." "I forgive you for entering without knocking." Grace laughed. "I knew that would work." She stopped, looked at the two of them, then smiled to herself. "What?" Grace shook her head. "Nothing." "No, what?" "You look—" She searched for the right word. "Ordinary." Neither man understood. Grace laughed again. "I mean it as a compliment." She looked around the warm bedroom, unmade bed. Coffee mugs on the nightstand, Shawn's reading glasses sitting beside Bartholomew's watch, a blanket half hanging onto the floor. Nothing about the room looked extraordinary. It looked lived in, comfortable, safe, for 2 men who had spent so much of their lives surviving. Ordinary was the happiest ending she could imagine. Grace quietly closed the bedroom door behind her. "I'll make coffee." The couple listened to her disappear downstairs. Then Bartholomew looked toward Shawn. "We should probably get dressed." Eventually. "You want to stay in bed?" "I've waited 20 years." Shawn gently pulled him back beneath the blankets. "I think breakfast can wait another 5 minutes." Bartholomew laughed as Shawn rested his forehead against his. Their scents drifted lazily through the room. Ocean air, vanilla, cedar after rain, dark chocolate. No urgency, no fear, no uncertainty, only warmth, only home. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher over the lake. Inside, the basketball keychains rested quietly beside the old childhood drawing. Two promises, both finally kept. And that's the end of Shawn and Bartholomew's story. From an impossible assassination contract to uncovering a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of power, they proved that love, trust, and a promise made as children were stronger than the people trying to tear them apart. What was your favorite moment? The childhood reunion, the basketball keychain, the cabin, or the final showdown? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next adventure. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far these stories reach around the world. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Until next time, take care, and I'll see you in the next story.